Welcome back. In the previous lessons, I discussed the initial contact, the preparation, and the behind-the-scenes systems before a new patient arrives at the office. Now, it's time to tackle what we've been preparing for, the patient's appointment. A subtle but essential part of greeting a new patient in the office is to say the patient's name the first time you see them. By now, the entire office should know when the patient's arriving, the patient's age, and their name. By deductive reasoning, a person walking through the door at the appointed time who is not recognizable to a team member is the new patient you've been expecting. Upon entering, greeting this new patient by their name instantly sparks a conversation and puts them at ease. It relays to the patient that the concierge or team member took the time to learn about them and can realize them walking in the door. It makes them feel like we already know who they are and expect them. This is a crucial point when nonverbal communication can positively or negatively impact the patient's experience. The concierge or team member who conducted the courtesy call should be the person who greets the new patient when they come through the door. Next, we take a headshot of them for our software system. Their picture is used for identification purposes and enables other team members to recognize the patient as we achieve and maintain their dental health. Our team uses the concierge to greet, seat, and collect data, but your team may be smaller. Handoffs and setting up the next team member for success are crucial to the new patient experience. Poor handoffs can be perceived as poor communication. Since I just went through the welcome greeting, let's walk the patient to the operatory. This is an excellent opportunity to conduct an abridged office tour. Explain how the office is designed, and be sure to answer any comments or questions the patient may have as you walk along. We train our staff to point out significant office aspects as they walk around the office, whether to show where to get a panoramic x-ray or where the restroom is located. At an operational meeting, ask your team to create a list of places in the office that should be shown to new patients. Find out what your team thinks makes your office stand out and show them to patients during the abridged tour. For example, I take and display landscape photos on frameless easels throughout the office, making it seem like an art gallery. My team knows where the photos were taken, so they become a point of conversation that has nothing to do with dentistry. Our sterilization areas are open to anybody walking by, which we try to highlight so patients know how important it is to us they receive the highest standard of care. Once the new patient is in the chair, the team member's role is to begin collecting as much diagnostic information as possible for the doctor. Exactly what information is gathered depends on how the patient entered the practice. Urgent or emergent appointments have an abbreviated collection phase, whereas perceived healthy or comprehensive exams have a more robust process. If your team is struggling with what to collect, just revisit Spear's new patient exam courses. For this lesson, let's assume the patient entered the practice with significant dental needs and a complex case which will need a return consult. Our team member also needs to have a court sense for this part of the appointment. They must have conversational skills and listening skills to identify key filtering flags or comments the patient makes to be able to relay this information to the doctor. This team member will also need to be fully prepared to answer the big why questions. Why are you doing this? I hate x-rays. Why do you need to take so many? Why do I need all these pictures? Why are you even doing this? These are frequent questions from most of our new patients. Although some of you may think these questions are annoying, our team doesn't mind answering them because it allows us to inform the new patient what we do and why we do it. An assistant is usually the first to stress to the new patient that we exist for their health, and we take all their diagnostic information to create a personal plan for them to achieve health. When any objections come up, we direct the conversation to the primary goal of the patient's health. Expect patients to voice objections and concerns. But remember, your goal is to establish trust and create a relationship through compassionate education. For this lesson, I'm not going to cover all the objections that can or will come up, other than to say the key is that you should prepare for all the common objections you hear. When a new objection is brought up that a team member couldn't handle, bring it up in your next team meeting and discuss and build a plan on how you want to address it for the next time. Following new patient data collection, there is a handoff from assistant to doctor. The team member with the patient must set up the next step for success, and the doctor needs to know. Each doctor has a unique conversation style, and each team member must adapt for that. My associate and I are pretty different in conversation, but we ultimately provide the same message to the patient at the first appointment. I like to have a quick synopsis of any key filtering flags and questions the patient may have asked during the data collection. When the assistant comes to me, I've already peeked at the radiographs and photos and have made an initial game plan. As a doctor, I need to use my court sense from the review of that information to know how in-depth I want this initial appointment to go, or whether it will be best served to have them come back for a complex case consult. Next, I relay to my assistant how we will approach the appointment and the patient together. Now, before you start going down a potentially massive time-wasting exercise, you need to pause and look over what was collected. Before entering the operatory, the doctor and assistant have another opportunity to filter and to think about, does the patient's collected information support the initial phone call filtering? Is this case straightforward or complex? Complex cases always come back at our office, and we use the remaining appointment time to create an opportunity for solution filtering. If the appointment is fairly basic treatment only, is the team prepared and able to discuss financials to support me? If the information collected does not support the initial phone call filtering, your team's court sense is paramount at this juncture of the appointment. If the patient is in hygiene and is not as healthy as they perceive themselves to be, how does your team transition the patient's mindset and still leave them feeling great despite not giving them what they initially thought they were going to get? When the opportunity presents itself where your team must transition or change the patient's mindset, language and conversational skills are the most important part of having the patient leave with an understanding of the value. Although every scenario is different and we can't possibly cover all of them in this lesson, I'm going to cover some of the conversational skills I use that seem to resonate well with my patients. No matter how a patient enters the practice, our goal is to transition them to health, which requires a complete new patient workup and a comprehensive evaluation. For urgent or emergent patients who respond to the dentistry as more of a reaction, it can take multiple appointments or sometimes even years to realize value. But for most of our patients, it can be gained the first time we meet them. This is done by taking them on a tour of their mouth. Your team will bring questions to the room, answer patient questions, provide analogies to explain the care, and explain photos and radiographs to educate the new patient about what you can do for them on their journey to oral health. You want to be efficient with your time, and if care is deemed complex, they need to be reappointed for a consult with your treatment coordinator. Every team member and doctor has a unique personality and a way of communicating with the patient. Having a cookie-cutter script like a Mad Libs and being prepared for a direct conversation are two vastly different solutions. Our team has used many team meetings to work on these conversation techniques. The many systems we've developed through these meetings highlight what we want to achieve in conversation and how to direct the discussion with difficult patients. We have also spent time role-playing in an operatory to ensure the team can adapt to the scenarios they could face. For me, I typically guide the conversation to the goal, their health. However, I use court sense to adjust the patient conversation based on how my team members and I feel the patient will receive it. When I enter the operatory and greet the patient, I use their preferred name, introduce myself, and I offer my hand for a shake. Typically, I'll sit down at eye level facing them and thank them for coming in, acknowledging that I've looked over their information. Then I say some pertinent information that was relayed to me. I usually ask how they heard of the practice to segue the conversation into my vision or why I'm here. The patient must know the practice vision because if they disagree with your philosophy of care, your treatment outcomes will always be less than satisfactory. Same goes for your team. They should also know why they're here doing what they do. This point, above all else, is most crucial to the success of the practice. The team first should understand why you show up early, stay late, and cope with patients saying they hate the dentist. If your team doesn't know your practice vision, I challenge you to share it with them at your next team meeting. If only one person sees your vision, it's just a hallucination. There are helpful Spear Online team meeting videos about developing a philosophy and creating a mission and vision statement. You need to have a quick, personal conversation to communicate your vision to the patient. Remember, you don't want to appear like you're reciting a Pledge of Allegiance because this comes off as cold and uninviting. So I'm going to give you guys what I say. Before I get started with the tour of your mouth and educate you on what we see, I think it's important for you to know my philosophy of how I do dentistry. I follow 2 simple rules. Rule 1, first, God made your teeth better than I can, so we might as well try keeping as many natural teeth around for as long as possible. Rule 2, I tell every patient, all my work is going to fail. And now, this is where I get a really big side eyes look from, did he just say what I think he said, on the patient's face? I said, I believe everything man-made will eventually fail, but our work is done hoping it will outlast how long you intend to use it. If the patient disagrees, this is the right time to settle any differences in philosophy before moving forward with the appointment. Next comes the tour/education of the mouth. At this point, we've predetermined whether the patient should already come back for a complex case meeting, but we will see where this conversation leads us. Now that the patient knows my philosophy of dentistry, I want them to understand how we determine what dentistry needs to be done. This is where I break into 3 priority categories. I call them the have-tos, the need-tos, and the want-tos. Have-to issues are things that have to be done to get the patient healthy. This means no pain, no infection, and no cavities. These are all issues that will only worsen and negatively impact their health if left neglected. It's important to remember that many urgent and emergent patients fall into this category for their first appointment. Capitalizing on this educational point is key to converting the patient from a reactive patient to a proactive patient. I tell patients that these have-to issues are like a honey-do list, and if I don't get them done, I might as well just be sleeping on the couch. The next category is what we called are the need-to issues. These are structural and functional issues that the patient has in their mouth that can be improved. So certain things we can improve are cracked teeth, missing teeth, worn fillings, crowded dentition, you name it, it goes in this category. Any treatment you could think could be done to achieve optimal health belongs in this category. Large restorations are also pointed out because although things are working and seemingly fine, our office goal is to provide predictable long-term dentistry. For example, we will show the patient photos of how a crown could be a more worthwhile investment with a predictable restoration than the 5-carpule MODBQZ amalgam restoration. Your team's job is to educate the patient using those fantastic diagnostics, videos, and other outlets so they don't feel sold dentistry. As Dr. Gary DeWood says, never on a patient. Explain what you could do until they should on themselves. The need-to issues are also on this honey-do list, and they could lead to sleeping on the couch if they're put off for too long. The third category is the want-to issues, are specific problems that the patient brings to the table. I usually have a joking conversation where I turn the floor over to them and I give them examples like you may want whiter teeth, you may want a gold tooth in your denture, or you may want to be in the dentist's office as little as possible. So some of these want-to requests may not even be treatment related. I leave this category broad and open-ended because I want to hear the patient's primary goals. After explaining the 3 priority lenses I use to analyze their data, I invite them to take the tour and dive in. It's essential to actively listen to the patient and repeat what they said to ensure they own their conditions and outcomes throughout any conversation. They do not want a lecture on dentistry. They want a personal conversation with a peer about what is possible. This is also where you need to be mindful of your time management to avoid going down rabbit holes with them. This conversation, just like all things, takes lots of practice and fine-tuning. My team finds that a few meetings every year is helpful to review key points and prepare for that conversation. In the exchange, make sure that you prioritize your treatment, that you listen to the patient, that you cause the patient to own problems and recognize their issues, and use data to educate and show. Regardless of how the patient enters the practice, we'll use the team language to create an engaged patient ready for the next steps in achieving health at our office. I go over handoffs, checkout, and the follow-up process in the last 2 lessons. I hope you enjoyed the conversational aspect of the dental appointment.